Saturday, January 19, 1946, 6 young World War II veterans from Nashua piled into John Johnson's sedan and left for Durham. 5 of the young men were Marine veterans and high school classmates in the Nashua High School class of 1941. They were joined by another friend, a recently discharged Army veteran who flew B-24 bombers during the war, which had ended only months ago. All 6 young men, John, who owned the car, his brother Bill, Ken Giles, Romeo Sinkovich, John Chimkonis, and Joe Devlin, drove to the University of New Hampshire that afternoon to register for the next semester, beginning in February. While in Durham, they met up with a high school classmate, Anita Molina, and another young woman, Barbara Rogers, both students at UNH. They all agreed to spend the day together. It was a cold day, with temperatures hitting 0 degrees and below. Late that afternoon, all 8 decided they would hop in John's roomy sedan and head to Dover for a warm dinner. On the way out of Durham, they saw 3 young women walking: Shirley Humphreys, Dottie Jean DeBrine Copps, and Nancy Stiles. They invited them along for the ride and dinner in Dover. It took a little shuffling for all 11 young men and women to pack into the car, but they managed. John Johnson took the wheel, joined in the front seat by Barbara Rogers and John Chimkonis. Everyone else squeezed into the back seats. It made for close quarters, but it wasn't so bad on a cold night. They sped along the road out of Durham, along Durham Road, perhaps humming or singing along to a few of the day's most popular tunes on the radio. In 1946, where the Durham Town Line and City of Dover met, near Mast Road, this area was still considered Dover's outskirts. There wasn't much street light except for the car's own headlights and the occasional other vehicle. As they continued down Durham Road into Dover, they approached a stretch of road that dipped down to Sawyer's Bridge, which crossed the Bellamy River and was named after the Sawyer family, whose mills were just beyond the bridge. John Johnson wasn't likely aware of the bridge's reputation as a troubled spot for drivers, especially in the winter. The bridge had been the scene of numerous accidents, including an ice cream truck that veered off the bridge into the Bellamy River not too long ago. As he navigated down the hill, the conversations of his 10 passengers buzzing around him, he realized suddenly the road turned sharply ahead, and he hit the brakes to avoid missing the turn. When he did, the car hit a patch of black ice and slammed through the bridge's small fence, plunging nose first into the frigid waters of the Bellamy River. The car began sinking immediately, pointed straight down through the ice toward the depths of the Bellamy. On their way to Durham from Dover, Robert Nash and Arthur Osepchuk, both residents of Dover and driving the company truck for Purcell's Cleaning Company, saw the wreck of the bridge's fence and saw the car in the water below. They stopped, jumped out of their truck, and rushed to the vehicle, which was nose down and almost submerged except for the trunk. Despite the cold water and sub-zero temperatures, both men immediately opened the trunk, removed the car's spare tire, and used iron bars in the trunk to pry apart the back seat. Osepchuk, himself a veteran of the Air Force during the war, was no stranger to acting fast in difficult circumstances. While in the war, his plane was shot down over Berlin, Germany. The only survivor of the crash, he would languish in Germany as a prisoner of war for 14 months. With the rear seat torn out of the car, Osepchuk and Nash were able to help free 6 of the car's occupants: the driver, John Johnson, his brother William, Kenneth Giles, Romeo Sinkovich, Arthur Devlin, and Anita Molina. By this time, numerous bystanders were at the crash site, as was Dover Police Chief Andrew McDaniel and members of the fire department. They would soon be joined by state police, the county solicitor, county sheriff, the state's motor vehicle inspector, and a county commissioner. As the fire department rigged up floodlights at the scene, the 6 men and women who escaped the crash were driven to Wentworth Hospital. They were suffering from hypothermia, exposure, and in some cases, shock. Called to the scene were 2 divers, Roland Fiedler of Kittery, Maine, and Thomas Marshall of Newmarket, both Navy veterans and experienced divers. Fiedler was part of the dive team that responded to the sinking of the USS Squalus off the coast of Portsmouth in 1939. As neighbors ferried hot coffee and cocoa to emergency crews on scene, 2 wreckers worked to pull the car from the river. Once hoisted out of the icy waters, the car was quickly searched, and the bodies of Shirley Humphreys and Dorothy Jean DeBrine Copps were discovered inside. 3 of the car's occupants were still accounted for, and the divers began their search, losing hope they would find survivors. By 2 a.m. the next morning, the divers reported they had found the body of John Chimkonis and removed him from the river. At this point, several hours had passed and temperatures had fallen more. The light was also proving to be insufficient. Rescuers decided to halt the search until daylight. They resumed the search on Sunday morning and at 10:13 reported they had found the body of Barbara Rogers. A short while later, At 10:55 that morning, they found the body of Nancy Stiles. Police questioned the 6 survivors at the hospital the following day, but determined the crash was a tragic accident, dispelling rumors about a truck that had caused the car to veer off the bridge. Newspapers around the country carried the tragic story for the next 2 days, which, sadly, was one of many weather-related accidents that weekend. By Monday, the local paper printed what would be its last account of the crash. It did, though, editorialize on the tragic loss, hinting at the grief and shattered families in the aftermath of the crash. Cold statistics fail to tell the story of heartbroken parents, notified suddenly that their children have been killed on the highway, the editorial read. The telephone rings in the night, and the police perform their duty by notifying the next of kin. In the University of New Hampshire yearbook of 1946, the 3 students who died in the crash were remembered. Their achievements and interests, cited in the yearbook, are a sad reminder of lives cut too short. One can only imagine how the lives of the 6 survivors were affected in the days and years after the crash. For one of the survivors, Romeo Sinkovich, the crash would find its way into his life unexpectedly. Sinky, as he was known in Nashua, was one of the city's best high school football players and a rising star in college football. But during a game in Georgia, his legs suddenly gave out. It was determined that his injuries from the crash in Dover nearly a year earlier were still taking a toll on his body. In its own way, it's tragic too that such a horrible crash that shattered lives seems forgotten to history. Even shortly after the crash, Dover and the country were preoccupied with post-war identity in a world still shattered from years of fighting. Days after the crash, Dover's Mayor Clyde Keefe seemed to be on everyone's mind. He called upon Dover to hold a Unity Week in February, which was intended to recognize the bond shared by all people, regardless of religion or race. Dozens of civic and religious leaders attended a program at City Hall on February 7, 1946, to denounce intolerance. But on the minds of many was the future of atomic energy and what it might mean for the world. Local tragedies already seemed a distant memory. And still, the newspaper found itself covering more accidents at Sawyer's Bridge, although none as tragic as the crash on January 19th. Many years later, the bridge over the Bellamy River would be rebuilt and the road realigned. Today, it's a heavily traveled stretch of road. As traffic now hurtles along in our fast-paced lives, it's good to take pause crossing that bridge and remember those whose lives were changed forever that night on January 19th, 1946.